IPRS for inviting me for this great opportunity and fantastic topic. But today is not about me. It's not about IPRS. It's about a fantastic topic that is on everybody's minds, from governments to NPOs, from, well, of course, MNCs to the individual on the street. We're talking about purpose, sustainability. And today we have the great pleasure to have Chia Boon Chong with us. He's the Director of Group Sustainability at Singtel. Boon Chong, how are you doing today?
Great, thank you.
Excellent.
And thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we have, before we start, just a reminder, please, for the attendees, please put your questions early on in the Q&A section so that we can address them. We're trying to make it about half and half. The first 10, 15 minutes, I'll grill Boon Chong, and then we'll have questions from the audience. So let's kick it off. You've been with Singtel for about 20 years.
Yeah, more than that, actually.
More than that. And 10 years ago, you made the change from corp comms into, I think then it was CSR, now it's sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, because we have so many people from the comms side of things here, and might also think about, how did you make that change?
Yeah. Okay. At the time, the company wanted to set up a dedicated unit just to look after CSR or sustainability. And I thought that, it was time for me to have a change in career. So after doing 16 years of communications at Singtel, I thought that was a good opportunity. And sustainability at that time was kind of like upcoming. And now it is really like the hottest thing in the world. So I thought that was a good time to make a change.
So talking about the hottest thing in the world, so what's top on hot on your agenda? Because sustainability can mean many things to many people. What is it for you at Singtel?
Yeah. Okay, so you're right. Sustainability is a very, very broad term, and it encompasses literally every facet of the business. But I think it boils down to about how to make the business sustainable, responsible, ethical, and how to have a positive impact on all the things that we do, the community, the environment. So you're right, totally, very, very broad topic. And I remember earlier on, when I first started out, when we started talking about, say, climate change, not many people kind of understood what climate change was, But I think today, people started to understand and appreciate the matter more.
So, Singtel doesn't run factories, so you don't have those massive chimneys on your production line.
Yeah.
So how do you, let's talk about climate change. How is Singtel looking at the topic and what you're doing about it?
Right. Okay. So while we are not on the radar, because we are not a huge emitter of carbon, more than 90% of our carbon footprints actually came from our network. Our base stations, our telephone exchanges, the broadband network. Data centers, not forgetting, especially in today's, with COVID-19, everyone is kind of like doing cloud hosting, and data center business is booming, but that will also mean more carbon emissions. So really it is about balancing the business growth and minimizing our carbon footprint. So actually about, say, 4 years ago, the team, okay, so when we first started, it was just 2 headcount looking at CSR or sustainability. And then 4 years ago, we finally had our very first environment manager to look at environmental sustainability. So today, our full headcount will be 6, that grew from 2. Yeah, and I must also add that about 3 years ago, we changed our name officially from CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility, to Group Sustainability, because we do a lot more, like responsible procurement. We look at social innovation, and we look at a lot more stuff relating to sustainability.
So, how do you also look at your role as somebody's not happy on the road out here. I hope it's somebody who is not happy how fast carbon emissions are most likely reduced. So how is Singtel also looking at the role of the whole value chain, right? And I mean that I've worked in-house and I realized as a large company that has a lot of vendor relations, you can actually don't have to wait necessarily for regulators to tell you what to do. You can already, by your procurement procedures, have an impact and drive it down the whole ecosystem. How does Singtel look at that responsibility? What you know, it's a two-sided medal.
Yeah. That's a very good question. In fact, sustainable supply chain management, I would say, is probably the most complex topic of all matters relating to sustainability, because it is really about managing the supply chain, and there are so many. It's just like in Singtel, we work with about 7,000 suppliers worldwide. It's probably closer to 6,900 plus, but it is a very, very complex topic, and it is about how do we manage our suppliers so that they are also behaving in a responsible way, an ethical way, to all their stakeholders, their employees, and of course the environment. It is definitely not an overnight journey, and we are still working on it. So we work very closely with our group procurement function. They of course own the relationship with suppliers, and group sustainability at our end, we will facilitate and try to push them towards working with the suppliers in a more sustainable fashion. So things like the supplier code of conduct, we a couple of years back, we already modified and making sure that we also incorporate human rights, labor rights, environmental rules in a way, to make sure that our suppliers do behave in a responsible manner.
As the head of group sustainability, where do you see your role? And that goes to my background and our attendees' background of mainly being communicators. Is it a leader, an enforcer, a guide, a facilitator? How does it work in a large group like Singtel to make things happen that might not have a direct impact on the bottom line, right? And at the end of the day, you're still a listed company that needs to produce profit.
I would say probably two roles: leader and influencer. Of course, in every company, I would say there will always be the believers and the non-believers, or those who are sitting on the fence. So really, it is about finding the allies and working on the naysayers, and start to show success. I think the term sustainability, might be a bit too broad a term, and the line will be like, okay, tell me what exactly is the impact or the consequences, in the business term. So really, we have to bring it down to the operational level, and show them, the way, and guide them. But of course, like you said, ultimately it is still, about the bottom line, and we are not, we are still a corporate function. So I think that internal stakeholder engagement is really, really important. So yeah, not easy. I would love to say that it is an easy task, but it's definitely not.
So hand on heart, across the board, where do you sit in the organization, and how would you? I don't want you to finger point, but is everybody in the board as excited as you are to drive that agenda while they have their quarterly targets to hit?
Yeah, if you're referring to the board, definitely. I think so I started the department in 2010, so it has been 10 years, and I can see that over the years, the board is taking a lot more interest in sustainability, as a board agenda. Also partly, I would say, well, first perhaps SGX, like 3 years back when they mandated sustainability reporting, and we already started reporting back in 2010. So people can see, okay, which companies are reporting and what are they doing in this area. So we also present to the board, our sustainability strategy, our progress, at least like once to twice a year. And it is also an agenda at our management committee. So all the big bosses they will also have sights over sustainability, the progress, the strategy.
Okay, cool. You didn't answer where in the corporate group structure does it sit?
Right.
A lot of organizations it's with corp comms, right? But you kind of try to get away from that, or are you still caught in that cage?
Yeah, exactly. So when I was in comms, CSR was just like half a head count. And as you know, the moment you have media crisis and the telco, well, we do have a lot of media crisis because network failures, you're just always doing crisis management. And CSR will always be like at the back burner. So when we first started, I think at that time the management wanted to do a lot of staff engagement around CSR. I think at the time the mentality was still very staff engagement. So no surprise there. Today we still report to HR, report into HR, but I think what is more important is that it really doesn't matter, where the reporting structure is really, as long as the the boss, firmly believes in sustainability and drives sustainability. I think no point reporting to someone, really, really high up, with a very, very nice, important title, but who doesn't believe in sustainability. So I think that's my point.
So I mean, let's look at the possible upside of, and most likely the upside of being under the HR part. Does it mean also, staff engagements are a much higher priority? So it's not just a green label on a red logo, but it's really like it's also really employee driven, and they get more involved and also initiate some of the measures you're taking.
Yeah, totally. In fact, so we have been driving a lot of staff engagement, around community, because I think when it comes to staff engagement, they do volunteering, and I think staff can see, that what the company is doing in the area of community, in the area of environment. I think these are the more visible ones. If we talk about, say, carbon reduction footprint, science-based targets, I think that will be a bit not too visible to them. And that's why we are really, really pleased that CSR, or sustainability here, it has always been the top 3 staff engagement drivers. So that is something, in fact, there was a year, it was like the #1 top driver for staff engagement. So that really, really pleased me a lot.
So maybe you can share then, how do you balance the issue of, when you're doing great things in the sustainability field, you should talk about it, but you overdo it easily, and your background is comms. If you overdo it easily seems like you're just doing it for marketing purposes.
Yeah. I always have that fear. It is a fine balance. If you do a lot of good things and you don't communicate, then nobody knows all the good things that the company is doing. But if you are over the board in a way, every small little thing, and the company uses the PR machinery it might be seen as boastful. So I think you have to strike a good balance. And I think today there is really, it's no longer just like news releases, because I think some companies, they're still very, very traditional. They're always thinking about mainstream media. They're still thinking about news releases. But I think today with all these social media platforms, my company at least, we are utilizing a lot, like on LinkedIn, to talk about some of the things that we do. But so, you're right. I mean, I always feel like, for some companies, when CSR/sustainability, when it's part under comms, the pros is that you get to see a lot of news coming out from the company. But I think the con is that sometimes you think, okay, is it authentic? Is it even worth shouting about? Yeah. So I think there's a fine balance.
So then, what are some of, in my opinion, and again, that's the PR head, what are some of the initiatives that you feel like they're easy to talk about, and they get maybe sometimes even more credit than is due, versus some of the things that you believe are really impactful? They're fantastic, but they're actually more of a hard sell as a story.
Okay. I think the most obvious ones will be the community-related ones. It's like staff volunteering, and working with, say, the social service sector. Very heartwarming stories, great pictures. And of course, companies will always compare, like, okay, how come the coverage in this mainstream media is bigger, even though I'm giving more money away. Uh, I think that one will be a bit too in your face sometimes, when it comes to stuff volunteering. But when it comes to something a bit more technical, say, like science-based targets initiative. I'm not sure how many of the audience here actually understand, this about the climate. There is this thing called the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So it's like an entity comprising representatives from WWF, and those carbon organizations. So they are like the global entity that will approve science-based carbon reduction targets for companies trying to reach, like a well below 2 degrees Celsius scenario about climate change and global warming. So those things, I think the comms folks, sometimes they find it very hard to sell it to the media because general media wouldn't understand SBTI or scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, that will form the total carbon footprint. I'm sure you probably also don't really quite understand what I'm saying, that scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. I'm no environment specialist. I learned on the job as well, but
you have to take up a science degree halfway or something?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's always like a challenge. And the media, they probably wouldn't be talking about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So like scope 2, that would be like the electricity bills, the electricity that you buy from the power grid, and that will form the carbon footprint. So scope 1 will be direct operations, things like your refrigerant, your diesel, your own company's vehicle fleet diesel. And scope 3, like things like staff commute, air travel, things like that. But I'm sure the media wouldn't be going into it. And really, how many environment-oriented media are there out there? So not that many.
Yeah.
So and there are great stuff happening in this area. We're always talking about like renewable energy, how companies are trying to go green, adopting renewable energy to help reduce carbon footprint. But I think that kind of story a bit hard to put it into the market.
Let maybe first of all, thank you so much for your answer so far. Reminder to the audience to please put your questions in the Q&A function so that we can answer your questions as well. And while those are coming in, maybe a follow-up question, maybe shifting focus a little bit from the environment because I mean, every business, even us, we have to look at what's our impact, our footprint, right? So I understand you're doing a lot about it. I also read that you're looking at alternative power sources from solar, for example. But let's link it a little bit more on your core business, connecting communications. How do you look from a sustainability point of view? It's not just the planet, it's also the people before the profit.
Yeah.
How do you look at that impact on society for good and bad that you have and want to address as the market leader?
Yeah, okay. Okay, so we are really in the business of communication, connectivity, right? So we connect people, we allow them to communicate, enable them. I think because of our core business, there are really 3 key areas that we look at for sustainability. One will be, of course, the carbon footprint, because like I mentioned earlier, more than 90% of our carbon footprint actually coming from our networks, our base stations, mobile base stations, the broadband network and whatnot. So how do we minimize it? The data center business is booming. The second area really is about the digital inclusion or digital literacy of vulnerable groups, especially say the seniors. So today we are really talking about the seniors not being left behind. How do they use smartphones, and maybe even something even more basic? How do they prevent themselves from getting scammed, right? Even working adults get scammed. So and they are vulnerable seniors. So how do we do that? And I think the third area that we look at, which is also one of our core community focus areas, is on digital citizenship and online safety, targeting at children and youth because they are vulnerable. Like today, kids as young as like 1, 2 years old, they're already like digital natives. They know how to swipe iPad and stuff. So very easy access to mobile devices, to computers, and how do they protect themselves? Because they are young, they're vulnerable. So I think we're looking at areas like cyberbullying, gaming addiction, device addiction, and even online privacy, because they are none the wiser, they're too young. So that is one area which we think is important. So we look at ways to educate them and also the parents, because I think it is important for parents to understand, the telltale signs, whether their children are being cyberbullied, or perhaps more importantly, whether their children are cyberbullying themselves.
One question I might want to direct to, so we talked about procurement, we talked about HR and staff, we talked about the board. Let's talk maybe also, I'm sure you're also interacting with, and you were touching on that topic briefly, investor relations.
Yep.
Right? More and more global investors are looking at investing into doing their part in transformation through the way they invest. It's no big secret who's the major investor in Singtel. Yeah. So how much is, but it doesn't matter. So how much are your investors or shareholders also driving, supporting, or also holding back the agenda? Because shareholders have also a dual kind of role, right? Yeah. They can do a bigger thing, but at the end of the day, ROI is one of the major things they have to drive.
Certainly. So I'm sure everyone read about the Temasek portfolio companies following Temasek footsteps, are looking at carbon footprint reduction. Okay, so Temasek aside, I think I must say that over the past few years, I'm seeing more interest in investors about our sustainability efforts, especially around those areas that you mentioned. So besides carbon, suppliers, and also data privacy. So these are the few areas, and human rights, probably. The first, like I say, I joined in 2010, and I must say that between 2010 and 2015, I can literally count the number of investor relations query around sustainability with one palm. Right. So that was disappointing. It's like we're pushing, yet we're not seeing the interest from investors. But definitely there's growing interest. In fact, there is this thing, interestingly, it's called the TCFD. So something which the comms folks might have to start to look at. So TCFD stands for Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. It started off as a framework for financial institutions to talk about their portfolio of investments. So how the risks around climate and their impact on the portfolio and the value. And of course, the banks, the financial institutions will in turn go down to the borrowers, companies like us, to say, okay, so how are we managing our climate risk? So we are one of the first companies to look at TCFD. There's actually quite an established framework, and we expect to start to disclose financial data in a way relating to climate matters. Maybe just to give you a clearer picture, actually, okay, so Singtel, we have our subsidiary in Australia, Optus. So actually, in Australia, there are more natural disasters, definitely, compared to Singapore. So we do have a wealth of information over there, like because of typhoons, cyclones, or bushfires, the kind of investments that we did, or asset impairment because of all these natural disasters, and how will that affect insurance premiums, for example. So there will be a lot of financial data surrounding natural disasters. So that will be the kind of climate-related events that investors are interested in. Perhaps Singapore not so, because it's like, well, we might have a bit of ponding here and there in Orchard, but not forgetting there's already like sea level rise expected, especially with the coastal area, the east. Just a couple of years back, I remember there was this very, very huge flood. Not sure if you remember, I always remember this media picture, people standing on the bench at the bus stop, because that was the level of that flood, the water level. And one of our exchanges in the east was actually affected by the flood. And that is climate related in a way, So of course, you can think about it as BCP, business continuity planning, but really it is about how do we make sure that we are not affected by flooding events in Singapore.
Maybe two last questions, as the time is just flying by. One is about, there's the framework of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, UN SDGs. You mentioned then the investor task force. You mentioned the science-based approach to carbon parts. There's so many frameworks. For somebody who want to get into that field of sustainability, what's a good starting point to not get overwhelmed with scientific numbers? Because PR people are not necessarily the most the biggest Excel sheet lovers in the world.
That's true. And that's why I always think that if you need to get a consultant, go for it. Because there are consultants out there who will help, you, the client, to navigate these areas. Because science like SBTI, and TCFD, they are very, very specialized topics, and you do have consultants out there who will be able to help. But I think from, say, a comms specialist, if you are interested in sustainability, some comms will, of course, you might think environmental sustainability as like the most important, but I think it really cuts across the entire business operations. Of course, you have the community angle, you have the ethics, you have the responsible business practices, things like fair marketing communications and whatnot. But I think a good area to start is really sustainability reporting. I mean, it's like we comms folks, we started a lot of reports, annual reports. So adding sustainability report to your, to your repertoire, I think not too difficult. But because sustainability report, it is based on GRI. I mean, that's recommended.
What is GRI?
Global Reporting Initiative.
Okay.
So GRI is based in Amsterdam, and they do have a lot of disclosures across all aspects of sustainability. Okay. And that will give you a very, very good understanding what are stakeholders looking for. So what are the kind of disclosures that companies are expected to do?
And rightfully, a lot of times companies have to start or focus with regulations of what they have to do. Everything else is the nice to haves a lot of times, right? That's what you have to do. So that might be a good idea. Thank you. And last but not least, Irene is very, very keen to know, Institute of Public Relations, Singapore celebrating 50 years. What do you see as the relevance and of IPRS in the industry today? As the very last question as we coming to an end.
Well, I will still link it back to sustainability. So it is really about the public relations, the comms specialists, helping to spread the word about sustainability. What companies are doing in this area, and the SDGs. How do we achieve world peace? By 2030, for example. So there's definitely a key role for PR professionals like yourselves out there. And you guys have the comms training and the background. So it is really about communicating the sustainability story in a very easy to understand way.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that was a very, very enlightening and insightful conversation. Thank you so much for your time.